Uh, Wait, I already started it, but yes, we are.
Okay, this Thursday. Cool.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right,
All right.
let's get it.
Let's get into it. All right. This is going to be an interesting one. We're going to have a lot of back-to-back conversation. I cannot believe it. Plus, I mean, I'm actually, and I didn't say this on record, even though it's being recorded, a little bit glad. Why? Because I'm going to be able to explore a little bit more of this topic, which is actually very interesting to me, which is Lost of Innocence. We have two new members. I don't know if since we have a short group, I don't know if we can just like ask them to introduce themselves so they feel a little bit more comfortable speaking. But as always, to interact here is optional. But we have a methodology, so we follow the order, the right order. I don't know if you have, and I need you to check for me, please. If you have the text, the chat, normally the way we do is that we write an exclamation mark, so that way we know who goes first and who goes second, and patatin patatang. So that's the way we keep track of those who are going to be talking. If you have any questions, you're always free to ask, and we have a wonderful team here sometimes, such as like Yusha, Nancy, and I, who are going to be able to assist you in whatever issue that you want to talk about or just to explore, because this is a safe zone for you to explore some ideas, which today will be Lost of Innocence. Yeah. So should we ask them to introduce themselves just to see if, for example, your mic works? I see that Javlin, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jafar. I'm 19-year-old and that's my first year in Dallas College. I just recently moved from New York, just a couple months before. Yeah, that was
That was it. That's fine.
Hey,
Uh,
whereabouts in New York?
New York from Long Island.
Oh, very cool.
the longest island. I don't know nothing about New York. I still have to be there, but
Mansi, do
it's
you
one
know anything
island.
about New York?
Yeah, yeah. I don't
Do
know.
you do anything about New York?
Yeah, I a bit big fan,
Just a bit.
big fan of the region. Yeah, Long Island is great, very cool. So welcome.
Welcome. And also we have Catherynne Burgos, which I think we have seen it before in this type of meetings. But I don't know if her mic is working. I just want to make sure if she is gonna be able to speak or not.
Yeah, my
I
working.
Hi. Hi, how are you doing? Can
I'm
you
good.
introduce yourself, please? Just very
Hi.
short.
My name's Catherynne Burgos. This is my first year in Dallas College, and that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. That's more than needed. Are you from Texas?
Yes.
Yes, good. Oh, from Dallas, or maybe from some other place. Some
Mesquite.
other Mesquite.
Yeah,
All right.
it's like right
Well,
there.
thank you. All right.
Well,
So let's get started with this. So, Lost of Innocence. Um, Yusha, I see that you already have the exclamation mark. Would you want to speak?
No, I was just explaining. Well, I was just giving an example when you were explaining that how we do things. We just leave an exclamation mark in the chat, and we go down in turn. For example, if Manzi puts an exclamation mark after me, it's his turn next. So that's how we see who goes in turn. And usually there are 2 or 3 officers at any given time monitoring the chat. So if you cannot speak, you can always leave it in the chat.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give a couple of pointers, and I would like to hear your point of view. The point is that at least in my belief, I see like in society we tend to try to protect, for example, children, so they don't lose their innocence. But eventually, we see innocence as something that it might be negative toward their overall experience in society, because if they are too innocent, maybe they are gonna be too vulnerable to some of the negative aspects that comes with growing up. So that duality for me is puzzling, and I want to explore that. And I've read for a couple of writers that one can like regain innocence, but I don't know if that's even a thing. So what are your thoughts on it? Uh, so yeah, that's my introduction. I'm assuming that all of you know a little bit of what innocence is, even though I'm not completely sure how we can determine if someone is innocent or not. Can we see an old people being innocent? Is that like how that happen? Yeah.
Yeah,
So the floor is
that's
open.
a big part of the conversation is what do we mean by innocence? When we say a loss of innocence, what are we losing? And is it the kind of thing that happens once? Is it the kind of thing that happens repeatedly throughout your life, depending on the circumstances? Yeah, I think you're right to tie it back to children, because I think a lot of people, when they think innocent, they think, a child's mind, a child's perspective. And I mean, children are raised in different environments, different circumstances. So, of course, just to tie it to children in general, I mean, I think that itself might be a question. I mean, some kids grow up quicker than others. Some people never grow up. So, I think all of these are
And
really interesting points.
couldn't we say also that there are some kids that they really never get to really experience innocence?
Yeah, that's a good question. Insofar as like from their earliest memories, it's like a struggle. It's tough. Things are maybe not necessarily traumatic, but I mean, okay, you know what? Let me throw something out there. Let me throw out a definition of innocence, and then we can kind of, play with it. Innocence is having one's expectations met consistently. So a loss of innocence is when your expectations of who a person is, of what the world is, of what a job is, it's when you don't have that met that you lose your idealism. You lose maybe optimism. Or other people might call that a reality check, something along these lines. So I'm trying to find a definition of innocence that is kind of like life spanning, to the point where it's not necessarily, just something that happens to children. But perhaps when it does happen to children, it's the most pronounced, insofar as it's never happened to them before.
Yeah, I mean, actually, when I was researching a little bit of the subject, because I also think that in order to explore this idea better, we have to have some type of notion of what innocence is. I saw that it's related to experience. That once you like really go through life, you experience life, then you have like kind of like that innocence goes away because you see the world in a different angle. The thing is like I can the way I see it is this like can we really say then that a person innocence is just like, and I think you cannot touch on it a little bit, just one, because you may be innocent in some areas even though you're very experienced in another ones. So like, can you truly lose all your innocence if you cannot experience everything in life? So you're still gonna be innocent in some areas of life. So can we lose the entirely of our innocence? And that's what like I'm trying to see, because for me that way it's next to impossible, because we're gonna be ignorant in some way or another, um, because we cannot do everything in life. We don't have that long expectancy, sadly. Uh, so yeah. Oh wait, you do want to talk right now? I see that you have another exclamation mark. Okay, go ahead.
By the way, welcome, Morgan.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice. Hi.
Hey, new person. So what I was going to say is when you guys were talking about the innocence in children, but see, that is a given. Like, it is almost expected of a child to be innocent, and if they are not, we consider them as rude and disrespectful. But we look at innocent adults as it's something very rare, because when I first came here to the United States from Saudi Arabia, of course over there we don't have any alcohol, we don't have any of the drugs. It's very strictly regulated because, again, it's a kingdom, it's not a democracy or a anything like that. So it's a very strictly ruled kingdom about what substance crosses the border. So when I first came here, of course, I didn't know that the difference between gin, tonic, vodka, beer, you have
The good stuff.
I know it's like hardcore stuff. And now, even though I don't drink, my coworkers, they do. They call me innocent for not knowing what a specific drink is. Like, I didn't know what a margarita was until this past weekend when we went for an office lunch.
Oh wow,
And
that's interesting.
my receptionist, she said that, oh my God, you're so innocent. Are you sure you're 23 years old? And I'm like, yeah, only because I'm not exposed or I'm not into that stuff does not make me guilty or innocent of knowing or not knowing or partaking in something. And we in the court, we say, amongst the attorneys, we say uh, innocent until proven guilty. So innately, we believe that a person did not commit the crime. Of course, if you're defending them, the person did not commit the crime and they're being accused or falsely accused of committing a crime.
Okay, one question. Sorry that I interrupt a little bit. Professor Benton, what is the name of the student? So I can try to help out. You are muted. I'm sorry, so I cannot. I still haven't perfected the lips reading.
Let
What?
me look at her full name. Hang on. It's Sheba. Her email says Sheba Jose. I guess that's the last name. I'm not sure if her email is exactly the same as.
So is she trying to get into this by her personal email instead of her student email?
I don't know. Does it matter?
No. Yes, it does. Because one, it's easier for me to find if she's using the student email. If she's using a personal email, you have to give me her email in order to give her access to.
Can I tell you her email right now?
Yes,
Okay. Or should I type it in the chat?
please.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me.
My sister to say something.
Louisa, you can send her. You can send Fernando a private message with your email address through Teams.
Yeah. Okay. So go on. I don't know if I interrupted you, Yusha, or if you're finished.
I'm done. It's Manzi's turn.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh
I
my.
like.
It's okay. Go ahead.
I like what you had to say, Yusha. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times when people hear the word innocence, maybe they think of like a courtroom scenario or some sort of like, innocent till proven guilty, or and so that begs the question, how are how's the same term being used in two different ways? Is it in fact a different usage at all, or is it just kind of more nuanced? I will say this, it's pretty. I think your example kind of ties back to Fernando's point about this idea of when you experience new things, fresh things. I mean, you have expectations that they're not yet really rooted in experience itself, but you bring them to the table. And so whenever your expectations are sort of either defied or maybe just, I suppose, confirmed, but maybe not in the way you expected. I'm trying to speak kind of loosely here so we can explore. That itself is sort of a loss of innocence. But I think really what we're getting at is degrees of innocence. So if you're somebody who has experienced a lot of things, if you're like worldly, then you're kind of used to the process of losing your innocence. You kind of understand going in, hey, I have this understanding of who you are or what this might be like, but I also understand that I'm probably going to be wrong with my expectations. And so you're kind of, I don't want to say hardened, but you have an understanding of how it goes. Like you're going to expect to be, I guess, educated, and so to speak. But of course, there are things that I suppose aren't necessarily encouraging when it comes to expectations not being met. And I think that's maybe more traditionally what we mean by loss of innocence, which is something that's not only defying expectations, but defying them in a way that is like tough to bear, or it takes time to sort of process. I think that's why a loss of innocence, it's called a loss because you lose something. Maybe you don't necessarily just lose your expectations, but you lose something that's maybe a bit more personal, a bit more I mean, how to put this? Again, idealistic, or dare I say naive. And so, the term naive, I think it's of a piece with innocence. And so let me throw this out to you. Do y'all think there are certain, I guess, experiences, maybe universal, maybe culturally relative, that are sort of designed to help one lose one's innocence in a way that helps one become an adult? So sort of like these rites of passage, culturally speaking or societally speaking, that it's like, oh, you still believe in Santa Claus? Should probably, it's about time somebody breaks it to you. And that might be tough because you're like, oh, geez, my parents have been lying to me my entire life. And that's tough to bear, but it's also like, well, you need to realize this in order to move forward, in order to mature.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do y'all think?
I think you bring an interesting point. And it does kind of like tackles into some of the things that I want to discuss, which is like, um, until what point innocence is bad, but then I'm gonna change it because, like, I don't understand. Like, sometimes people want to like protect their children. For example, with Santa, they sell this idea to Santa knowingly that eventually they're gonna have to tell them that it's fake. So you're purposely lying to them for an experience that's gonna last a couple of years, and then you never know how they're gonna take it. So like you're doing this deliberately, kind of like expanding on the innocence that eventually you're gonna have to either take away or like do something that probably they're not gonna take as one no, because one no never know how another person can react to such things. If you're believing firmly that somebody is giving you all you want and all of a sudden that's a lie. um but the other thing also is like I do believe that, for example, in a world where like a lot of things are happening and some of them are negative, like don't we require some level of innocence in order to like improve it? Because I don't know if that makes sense. First, for example, let's say that everyone is not everyone. Let's say like we have a group of 5 people and you just get in there, and from those 5 people actually nagging someone, and apparently that's the way culture works. They're always like, if you have 5 people, but then someone is innocent and he doesn't just rule by those laws, and he start like just acting differently because he doesn't know that that's a thing, and he believes in his innocence that it shouldn't be that way. So he, in a sense, trying to fight for keeping the innocence, he forced something to change in that group of people, but it's just by through innocence. So to what extent innocence can help change some um, preconceived ideas of how society should be um, uh, act or rule. Um, so I do want to see those two ideas kind of like be played out, because I do think that it is a detriment of our society to kind of like fight for like expand some innocence needless. But I do think that in some sense we need it in order to make some changes, because if you believe that the world is that way and you don't think it can change because for you that's how it is, like then you don't change. So I do believe that in a sense human needs some sort of innocence, so you can kind of like believe that something better can happen, even though you never know if you're actually going to meet the expectation that you're trying to do.
A great point.
And
I think
Catherine is next. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Um, so yeah, I think you like said how like the loss of innocence is like important for like everyone, because like everyone like eventually experiences that loss of innocence, and it's almost like kind of like those coming of age movies where it's like, you're like a high schooler and then you go into like a crazy college party or something, and you like go through like this realistic, like you don't like only have like that like rose colored glass like view of life, where not everything is like optimistic and not everything is good. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, it's a very good point that you bring. Like, yes, Yusha. Uh, he Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry, I had some background noise. I was saying that the innocence is just what we title something, or the act of not knowing something that the society looks down upon. For example, drugs, alcohol, intercourse before marriage, or anything of that matter. That something that we frown upon as a society, and if someone doesn't know it, we call them being innocent, as kind of like shoving it under the rug, or putting it under the rug, saying that, oh, it's okay, you're too innocent to know this anyways. So we use it as an excuse that someone doesn't know something. And Catherynne, if I'm not wrong,
Yeah.
I believe she said it right, that um, nowadays it's being portrayed in movies. I forgot the name of the movie where.
Well, I think I mean, while you look at it, I do believe I see what your point is, that there is plenty of content nowadays where they're like the little girl who is so innocent, and all of a sudden she's a bad ass, and start like now owning the world because she now know how to act like a bitch.
Yeah,
So
I mean
so yeah.
that's true. If you look at the stuff that's come out in just in 2019. I mean, on right on top of my head, I can think of Good Boys, that was rated R, which had minors performing in the movie as actors, and the language is so vulgar. The scenes are, I mean, it's not something that I would even be comfortable watching by myself. And then there is the series. I think it's on Netflix. I could be wrong. It's called The Boys.
Oh,
And
I
even in
think
that,
The
in
Voice
in a
is
sense
in
of
Amazon
comedy,
Prime.
they in under the protection of the title of comedy, they push out content which is, let's just say, growing up, I would have been beheaded if I would have used that kind of language. So that's how much it's changed in the 23 years uh, that that I've been on this planet.
I mean, yeah, it changed at least when you came here for sure. That's probably still the same in your country. Um,
You know,
all right.
it's kind of funny you bring up, like TV programs and stuff. I'm not familiar with the ones you referenced, but I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about child actors and child actresses, and how to how to elicit a reaction from them. And a lot of times they would just like, according to this podcast, they would say, "Hey, tell them a lie that would really upset them, so we can get our shot." So it'd be something like, "Hey, your parent just died in a car crash, but you got to do this scene," and so they're really upset, and then they capture the scene, and then they tell the kid, "Hey, we were just joking. We're not
Wow.
joking." It's like, "Hey,
Wow.
we needed you to do this, and this is good for you because now the scene is really good, and you're gonna get money and stuff like that, whatever the case may be." But I mean, imagine trying to explain that to a child, like, "Hey, there's such a thing as lies, and sometimes you have to say lies to people to get what you want from them." I mean, imagine learning that and being the victim of that at such a young age, in a way where like your genuine reaction is captured on camera. I mean, the other side of naivete is jadedness. So if you're jaded, it means that nothing surprises you, quote unquote. You're cynical, or whatever the case may be, however you want to put it. But I mean, getting back to Fernando's point, if you do reach this point of cynicism, because you've had your expectations dashed repeatedly, day in and day out, on a very kind of big level, how do you keep that freshness? How does one maintain one's innocence throughout life? I mean, that might be the challenge of life itself, is how do you keep optimism? How do you keep the faith, so to speak, in life itself?
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's for me is incredible. How can no, this is the other side too. Like if they see, for example, that it work, that they through that lie they became like famous, and now their family are like having money and stuff. Like you're creating someone who might be very willing to like lie his way through life, regardless of what it is, just to like, because he thinks like that's how he's gonna get better results if you just continue like being honest. But it is sad. I mean, I didn't know those kind of things happen. I mean, I was like, okay, the kid probably just like really believe in this scene, and now I'm gonna be. Now you just burst my innocence just right now, man. Now if I'm seeing a child in a movie like really like kicking it, like wow, that guy is so good, like probably he's being lied behind the stage. It's so sad. But yeah, but I do believe that you also touch a certain point that is like, okay, let's say one loses the innocence. Can we regain it? And I do believe that, I guess it's, I mean, I'm just brainstorming here, don't take my words as the ultimate philosopher or something. But I do believe that it could be a way. Because, like, for example, let's say that you have constantly been dashed, as you mentioned, that you never really met life as you think it is, and everything seems like it is falling apart. But there is a moment and where you start like really starting like to really kicking it, like, you know, like I don't care, I'm just gonna be back to my roots. You kind of like go into like their own house and you start like, I don't know, doing whatever it is that you do to meditate, and then you start changing your life and start believing that there is a better way to do things, and you don't really play by the old rules that you were playing before. And then you have a side of the view that yes, probably, I guess it's like a mixture, maybe like a balance, maybe in kind of like going through the whole Aristotle, was it, the golden rule that you have to be in the middle. Maybe you regain part of it, and you still kind of a little bit corrupt, but you have your innocence there. Understand how the world works, but you still have innocence enough to believe that there is something that it could happen for the better.
Yeah,
So maybe has to keep a part of the innocence, but to let ourselves be corrupted a little, so we can be in this society. Um, that otherwise we cannot do anything if we don't know how it works.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a great. I mean, all those are great points, especially yeah, that last one about kind of having to maintain a sense of I guess reality. It's I like how you put it corrupt, but it's almost just like, well, if you're completely innocent all the time, you're going to be exploited. You're going to be taken advantage of, and that's, you know, that itself might be a hard truth to face. Um, but it's also, it reminds me of this other point. Oh, I think Louisa's student just sent us a Teams request to join.
Oh, really? I mean, I sent her a direct link to, so let's see. I was talking. Yes, I see. Thomas Shiba. Yes,
Yeah,
I just accepted her. Um, let
but yeah,
me. Oh, accepted him. It could be a guy. I don't know. I just hear Chiva. Okay.
we'll find out soon enough.
So
I but I like what you're getting. I've never really considered that part of it before. In terms of, you can kind of, the human being can manufacture its own innocence, specifically by seeking out new experiences or by trying to meet new people, things along these lines, reading new books, watching different kinds of films, etc. It's like, hey, I know almost nothing about this. Let me just, you know, I have my own ideas just inherently, but let me see what it's like. And wow, I think we call it mind blowing sometimes, where it's like, holy cow, I've never thought of it like that. I've never considered that perspective. And I think you're right. It's an attitude I think one can cultivate, where you're looking to have your expectations dashed because it keeps things fresh, because it keeps things exciting, thrilling.
yeah, I mean, and I do believe that I think that is something. The reason why I think about it is because I believe in a sense it happened to me years ago. Like I was a little bit more serious because I was kind of like, people suck, and then it's like, you know what, I mean, that happens sometimes. But have I considered maybe having a different approach? And then after I did a different approach, things changed. It's kind of like, okay, maybe, I mean, my innocence wasn't that wrong. Maybe it's just that I was in a specific time or a specific place where those ideas of my innocence being wrong were being like cultivated even longer, and all I needed was to move to a different side, so innocence was a little bit more fitting. um, I mean, that doesn't mean that what I learned before doesn't help me. It's just that there is probably a way for you to kind of like cure those things that seem to be wrong at first. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, because it's on the one level, we're kind of trying to consider here, just based upon our back and forth, is innocence something you want to preserve, or is it something that is good for you, beneficial for you to lose? And this kind of goes back to a point I was alluding to earlier. I think oftentimes when we discuss a loss of innocence, and I'm trying to remember exactly why Marcus brought it up in the first place, but I think he was discussing it in like just an entirely negative context, which is to say that no,
Yeah.
you're losing something that you'll never get back again. And I do think there is something to that, especially again when you're young. Going back to the childhood actor or child actor example, I mean there are countless stories of people who broke into acting when they were very young, and then things didn't really turn out well for them, for in all these different ways. Now that's not
Yeah.
for everybody, but it does suggest that while maybe there's a time, especially when you're young, where you want to preserve the innocence of that person. And look, I don't have any children, but I imagine that is the essence of parenting. And again, I'm just speculating here, but it's like it's being able to raise your child or your children in such a way where you can kind of break down their innocence in a way that's responsible, in a way that is, it doesn't like shatter their sense of self or sense of the world. You kind of maintain that there are still aspirations, there are still expectations worth holding on to, but it might not be exactly what they think it is. And that's why I think things like Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy, I think that's the function they serve in society, is like that is like a very safe place to sort of say, hey, it's not what you think. But you learn something about morality from it or whatever.
Well, I mean, it depends how it is approached. If your parents were constantly making a big deal, then it's like how moral your parents are. If they constantly really put you into it to later like make a huge deal about how it is not real. Because for me, that's like, oh, I don't even know if I'm gonna have children, but that's something that I do have to say. Like, I'm not gonna put them into it. I'm gonna explain that there is something that happens. I will tell them this happens. Feel free to ask, and if it is on my capabilities, I would give it to you. But like to act like purposely lie to them and telling them something is happening that isn't, it's like I'm going out of my way to say a needless lie. And then I have to think on how I'm gonna say that again, like, but in the verse, like, no, no, thank you. But I do want to touch something because you were mentioning that part of where Marcus bring this topic was because of the pain that people go through, and then like how they like are being stole from like a part of them that is really, I guess, good in society to have here and there. Because I mean, we know that, I mean, the reason why people take um, advantage of those who are innocent is because they know that their intentions normally are good, and they do not like it's easier, it is easier for them to take advantage of it because they have some motives that are not that good. But I also believe that the reason why it is more normal to like not come back from some level of innocence is because, I mean, as individuals, we try to go away from pain. If we can avoid it, we try to. And if like to go through that level of pain, to like lose your innocence and then purposely like working your way back to being some level back there again, there has to be some resistance, because it's like, why would I willingly put myself into being innocent again if you know that there are gonna be people who are gonna try to take advantage of it, and I'm gonna have to like go through the pain again. Like, it is just easier to stay like quote unquote corrupted, That way, you're not gonna face this pain. You're gonna experience others, but not those. So I think that is why. And I mean, if you ask me, I feel like we should try, at the very least try, because I mean, if everybody has just that thought, then like, are we really gonna go to like a better place? I mean, at least in my opinion, we need more people who mean good, and part of that mean good is to be innocent in some way or another. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I really admire those points. Because again, it's like it takes courage to keep putting oneself out there. I mean, innocence, we could say, is synonymous with vulnerability. You're vulnerable in the sense that you're opening yourself up to pain if you're just going to be completely trusting of the world being the way it seems to be, or somebody being the way they seem to be. Yeah, I think it does require a certain sense of strength as you continue to advance through life, and you want to preserve this sense of awe with the world. Again, this sense of wonder with the world. Yeah, the other side of it might be this too, because I don't want to equate having expectations not being met simply with a loss of innocence. Because oftentimes when your expectations are met, it could be a good thing. Like, oh, I thought this movie was going to stink and it rocked. That's not losing your innocence, but your expectations are being met. Can you say your expectations were disappointed? I mean, technically, but not really. So yeah, getting back to Marcus's idea, it's like, hang on, my ride's here.
you're right.
Did you hear that? Every 5 seconds.
Oh, okay, I see. I understand. I didn't hear it, but I know what you mean. The
I'll make that
cops,
joke every time. But
the police.
yes. Well, honestly, things like jokes are another instance of that, where, I mean, what makes a good joke is that it kind of diverts your expectations. You expect it to go one way, and then suddenly it goes a different way, and you laugh. And what's a greater sign of joy than laughter? So I do think that the loss of innocence that maybe Marcus intended has a sort of inherent relationship to pain, in a way where, again, it's something that requires focus to reconcile oneself. It's a struggle to accept certain things. So if you consider a loss of innocence like that, well, going back to Catherine's point, a great example, or I should say, a great way to sort of, I guess, train oneself for the loss of innocence is to maybe watch coming of age movies or read coming of age novels, where it's not you going through it specifically, but you can see or observe somebody going through it, again, fictitiously, so there's no real pain. But in watching or reading about a protagonist overcoming their loss of innocence, it kind of prepares you for your own inevitable loss of innocence.
I see. I mean, yes, and I do agree with it. I think I either I read it on your class, or I've seen it in different areas. But for example, one example, it seems to be Harry Potter. Apparently, since that happens like that the book itself is like promoting people to work better as a team. They understand better the friendship, and they understand that things are gonna be bad. But I mean, they use it as a role model how you should like approach certain in life that eventually gonna happen. So I understand what you're saying. And yes, I do believe that is why also it is so important not only to I mean, to ensure that, well, it is hard. I guess if it is a parent, you need to kind of like work your way to like expose your kids as long as possible with good content that's going to promote some type of like readiness to how better lose your innocence. I don't know if that's a thing. Um, Luisa is recommending a movie, an education, Great Loss of Innocence movie. Is that the title? Like just like an education, Great Loss of Innocent movie. Okay, I will see it. Um, so yeah, I mean, it is hard, but that's why I also believe that it's important for us to even have people who are like old age and have some type of innocence, because then if you have those people, you have kids who are watching, and they're kind of like, okay, there is a way that is not just corrupted. They have different options to choose from, and that's why I also try to push the idea that even though you might feel like, why would I change? Like, well, because there are people behind you watching, and yes, certainly you may not be the one who are going to be benefited the most out of it, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that others behind you will appreciate the gesture. I guess. I mean, they wouldn't really appreciate it because for them it's going to be normal. But I guess that's what we're trying to achieve now, that there is a more stable normality where like things are not as corrupted as they are.
Yeah, and again, I like everything you're saying. It's really spot on. Just to add to that, it's I think it's different when you're an adult and you have control over your experiences more than when you were a child. So I mean, when you're a child, you're just exposed to whatever your family, thinks that is appropriate, even if it's maybe not. So I mean, look, I never saw any of the Harry Potters except for the first one. So I don't know exactly what it's like. It seemed to me like magic was just a metaphor for puberty. I don't know, but yeah, I will say this. I remember. So there was a time when the ratings for movies were different than they are now. So there was no like PG-13 stuff like that. So you know what I'm talking about? R, PG-13, PG. It's like the idea being that your age dictates almost entirely from the cinema Hollywood perspective what you should be allowed to be exposed to in terms of like the content, as graphic as it might be, be it violence or anything sexual, whatever the case may be. But I remember my mother wanted to see a movie that was rated R, and I was very young. And you were allowed back then, if you were the parent, hey, I know my kid's 7 or whatever, but I say it's okay, and they would let you go in. So we went and watched this movie called A River Runs Through It, which is just about a family getting kidnapped and like guided down like the Colorado River or something. And it was so horrifying to me. I'd never seen anything like that. I was like weeping in the theater. I was like, can we please leave? My mom was just like, it's not real. It's fake. And I couldn't differentiate fiction from nonfiction. And it was like, to this day, I still think of that movie, and I haven't watched it since. I bet if I watched it now, it wouldn't be as scary. But at the time, I was like, this is like, even I knew at the time I shouldn't be privy to, I shouldn't be watching this. It's too emotionally intense for me. And I only bring that up because I do think that there are certain social mechanisms put into place that are supposed to kind of guide, parents or guardians when it comes to what is and is not appropriate for people. Now, I mean, that could take us in a whole different direction in terms of, well, who gets to decide that, who should be the ultimate authority, et cetera. But I mean, drawing upon my own experience, it's like, I wish that I hadn't seen that movie so early because I was not ready for it. I wasn't prepared for it. And, I think that kind of gets at what Marcus was saying, is that, and also what you were saying, is that, there are times where even in the moment, you're realizing this is beyond me. Like, why are you telling me this? I'm not prepared to hear it. Things along these lines. And it's in those moments where the innocence is being lost in a way where you're not relinquishing it. It's being taken from you. And you almost wish that it wouldn't be. Another example was, I remember I had a Siberian Husky growing up. Her name was Valentine. Beautiful dog, awesome dog. Loved her so much. And she got loose. She would get loose all the time. And me and my friends would have to track her down and bring her back. And it was kind of an adventure for us. But one time she murdered she killed a cat that was the pet of a child who didn't really have many friends. And long story short, her parents made my parents put the dog down, but they didn't tell me that. They gave me the classic, oh, Valentine, Valentine needs to be on a farm and run around because she's like basically a wolf. She's a Siberian Husky. And I bring this up because you just got a Siberian Husky, did you not?
Yeah, I
Exactly.
do. Just
And
yeah.
so
Ugh.
they told me it was that, you know, she's going to be happier on the farm. She could run around to her heart's content. And I believe that as a young child, as like an 8-year-old. And I remember telling that story to my friends when I was in high school, like 17, being like, yeah, I had a husky once. And I told them that story and they all just looked at me and laughed. And they're like, dude, your mother lied to you. Like there was no farm. And I remember being like, oh, really? And I went to my mother as a 17-year-old, almost an adult, technically. And I, I confronted her about this. And her response was, I don't want you hanging out with those kids anymore. I guess because, they took my innocence from me on some level. Both, the fate of my dog, my beloved dog, Valentine, and also, I realized that my mom lied to me about what I consider to be a member of the family.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's a good example of both the positive and the negative. Because my mom was like, no, I mean, I wish you would continue to believe that lie forever. But my friends were like, you're too old to not realize this. I
Yeah.
mean, have you ever had those moments, those experiences?
Yeah, of course. I have those experiences many times in my life. I mean, yes, this is the like due to things that I already talked to you, Mansi. My mom was extremely overprotective over me, so she was full of lies. And everything that make me happy, she would say it, and it's like, but why? And the thing is, like, I'm very curious for nature, so like for me, I pick up the lie like fairly quickly, maybe not instantly. I will believe you. But then it's like something doesn't make sense. And since it doesn't make sense, I will continue asking. And I eventually will find a way. It's like, why? Like, what is the need? Like, I understand that you want to protect me, but like, there is a moment, and that's something that I do want to say also, like, there's a moment that break gonna have to happen. I remember that Movina, that the first time that she was like exploring philosophy and all of that, she felt like this was like horrendous. Like it was like, how can it be that they're like even considering the notion of religion when religion is something so dear to me? Like they're exposing me to all these things that seem so much, and it's kind of like, well, but sometimes you have to see it. I mean, it needs to be like a legway, of course, but sometimes you have to see it because when are you going to be ready to certain things in life that happen? You can't really never be completely ready. You have to, sometimes you just have to kind of like, hey, and trust that it's going to be fine. um so that's why like we need to like have some tools in advance so we can like be able to process all the cons, but we still see like cameragraphers who like go to war all the time and that they see all those atrocities and they still cry like babies when they take a very picture that is kind of like, this is too much, and they're used to it, and if they are doing it, like imagine what happened to someone who is less used to it. um but I think that needs to happen, that break. Maybe you were too young for that movie, but if you're never exposed to it, I probably you will have the same response once you're like an adult, and that would be, at least in our society, a little bit like you're already an adult, like you shouldn't be having these responses. Yeah, Professor Lisa wants to say something.
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. So I was going to just kind of pose a question, but I'm interested in the idea, or I guess the question of whether, studying philosophy results in a type of loss of innocence because of the kinds of questions. I guess like one of the things I always talk to my students about is this ignorance is bliss idea, and then we compare that to Socrates, unexamined life is not worth living, but we talk about how living an examined life, Jeff mentioned pain earlier, can result in a lot of pain and can result in, like I have students who a couple weeks into the class, sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed, I'm anxious ever since I started taking this class because I'm having to think about stuff I never thought about. So I'm just kind of interested in maybe if people wanted to talk about their own experiences with philosophy as a type of loss of innocence.
I like that idea.
Me too.
I mean, I'm always willing to talk, but I don't mind if somebody in the audience or members or beautiful members want to say something. I'm more than glad to it. But I have something already to say, just in case. And I mentioned this because I saw Catherine wanted to say something, or maybe she was just laughing. I don't know.
No, I was just laughing.
All right, that's good. Okay, well, but I do believe that you're on the money, because I do think that philosophy exposed you to certain things, which kind of like force you to lose your innocence. Because if you have this strict idea and there's something like, well, you know what, that idea may be wrong because we have also this idea that seems to be a little bit more fitting for certain specific situations. And like, oh, so like that notion that okay, I'm wrong, like, it's kind of like I never considered this point of view. Like you're losing their innocence. I mean, it could be for the beneficial. It depends really on how you use it. um but yeah, I do believe that that you're constantly losing your innocence with philosophy. I don't think it is in a bad way though. That's what I have to say. I think maybe there is a way of like losing it positively and negatively, because in this sense, like it could be like losing the innocence with the benefit of like now you're able to understand other side of views, so you don't really necessarily are gonna act like corruptly or anything. It's just like you have a better pool of information that you are analyzing, so you can be a little bit more prepared for what comes next. You can like understand the different type of discourse, different type of readings, and some situations in society you're going to be able to see them to different perspectives, like okay, this is just how humans interact. So I don't think it's like a vast loss of innocence, but I do think it is some sort of it, because if you're never exposed to like, you're gonna see a lot of like, for example, if you're really religious, you're gonna see people like religion doesn't exist. It's like, oh, what? Wait, what? And where I come from, that's even inconceivable, but that's conceivable here, and you have to actually be forced to analyze whether or not their points make sense or not. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Do I have to do the thing?
Be my guest, please. I
Uh,
will encourage everyone to do it, but I cannot force anyone to do it. So it's just highly encouraged.
So, well, for me, I feel like my philosophy class or my ethics class, it was not like a loss of innocence, but it just like you said, it broadens my world, and like I can like start like seeing things, because I feel like another part of innocence and like especially like in your childhood is that your world is based on you, and it surrounds basically only you and the people that you love and the people that you interact with. So with philosophy, that like it makes you like you're just like one speck kind of a world, and you also have to think about everyone else. So I guess maybe in that sense there's like a loss of innocence, because you it's not only like the world doesn't revolve around you, but like it's not exactly a loss, just like a broadening, a widening. Yeah.
Good stuff. Aligning. That's gonna be clipped for the video.
Yeah, very well.
Very well put. You earn a couple of extra points in there. Yes, for
Yeah,
that
Catherine was my student this past semester, and she did a fantastic job in the class.
You don't have to lie.
But I will say this. I think that's a great point. First of all, Louisa, thank you for bringing that up. That's an awesome thing to consider, because I think it was Susan or Professor Carrillo who brought this up a few weeks ago. Plato, when we were talking about love. But yeah, I mean, I think Plato's a classic example of describing again the living, no longer living, but at the time, well, actually not at the time, legend Socrates, but he's alive in all of our hearts, folks. Socrates was somebody who was supposed to be the embodiment of philosophy, and he was put to death for I mean, people say irritating the wrong people, but really he was forcing them to relinquish convictions that they never really thought about but didn't feel comfortable not living with, and that resulted in his untimely demise. So I think it does paint this picture of philosophy where it's like, yeah, you got to proceed with caution, even with yourself, not just with other people. Because if you plunge yourself into the depths of your own questioning and your own wondering, you could begin to spiral. It could be, it could be too much too quickly. I think, philosophy classes, the intros and the ethics, I do think they do a good job of preparing you to, again, to use Catherine's word, broaden your horizons, broaden your perspective, and sort of understand one's place in the greater whole of things. But it does so in a way where it's kind of like, I guess, again, cautious. It's bit by bit. It's introducing you to these ideas piece by piece, as opposed to just kind of plunging you into this thing of like, is anything real? Is anybody real to us? Is there such a thing as God or gods? It's like, it kind of prepares you for these big questions in a way where it's a healthy loss of innocence. It doesn't make it, completely pain-free, of course, but at the same time, it does allow for growth. It allows for a deepening of oneself by virtue of the fact that you realize, again, it's not all about you. Yeah, I mean, philosophy means, the love, philosophia, the love of wisdom. But wisdom is essentially, again, the understanding that you previously didn't have. But of course, you had some understanding, so you have to kind of like sacrifice that for the sake of different approaches to things, different understandings of not just anything in particular, but like the big issues, the big questions. I think that's tough. You want to juxtapose it with religion. It's like, well, religion gives you these answers that, might be very convincing, but if you meet somebody of a different religion or a different faith, can you have a conversation, like a sincere one? One has to be willing to hold one's own, I suppose, principles or convictions in question for the sake of that broadening. And I think that's tough. But like I said before, it takes courage, and I think it's rewarding.
Good point. And I guess that is a good point and end note to finish, since we're already over 4:30. And we need to vote on the next topic. If it's finished for me, we continue. But
Yeah,
as you may, well, I don't know how
think
many of you know. No, I don't know if you may know, but we may take like way longer. But yes, normally the way how it goes is that if you have any topic in particular that you want to discuss for next week, you can let us know, and we write it down in the chat. Then we vote on it, and the one who more votes is the topic that we're going to be discussing next week. So if any of you have any topic that you are like interested in talking about, feel free to say now. Then you gonna have to like hold your peace. And yeah,
I like. I suggested the sacred last week. I think that might be something to consider. What is sacred? Is anything sacred? I mean, it kind of relates to loss of innocence.
what else?
He's not interested.
Not interesting. I mean, hey, I already brought it down, but we know how it goes. Like we consider your idea, and then it just get crushed by another idea. That's the way philosophy goes. So I'm not gonna give you hope. I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. Again, you've robbed me of my innocence. But and some other things we didn't really consider with regards to loss of innocence. Because look, if we wanted to, we could just continue the conversation next week. We don't have to necessarily pick a new topic. But yeah, I mean, there are things that are very important to people in such a way where they recognize, they see it come. This will be a loss of innocence, and so they kind of prepare for it. So you think of like losing your virginity, for example. I mean, it's like, well, I know this is going to change me in a way that makes me more quote unquote adult. So I want to make sure that it's done in a way that I am happy with. So, I mean, there are these kinds of rites of passage. Maybe we could talk about rites of passage. But at any rate, I did want to say to the those who are new here. So again, yeah, Morgan, who's my student right now in the Wintermester, Sheba and Chaplin. It doesn't have to be anything crazy deep. Like the topic could be anything, and we can find the philosophy in it. So don't feel as though you have to come up with some like
Yeah.
like
The topic the topic could be, what is the philosophy of anything?
that's
And
pretty deep.
that's it. That's very deep, right? But I mean, it is broad enough. By the way, Jacqueline is asking if we can talk about sexual assault.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't see why not.
yeah, we can. This is an area where we can safely discuss pretty much anything. Uh, yeah, and I actually recently have some things to say about that, sadly but truly. Um, okay.
I mean, I was gonna say food.
No. So, but you want to talk about like the plane? I'm gonna need a little bit more of expansion on the idea. Just sexual assault overall, like what it is, or like how it affect people. Like, do you want some specific side? It's just for me to like write it on the possible topics to discuss.
Um, like I'm trying to I want to discuss that topic. Like people have a different opinion on that sometimes. Like some people support those people who did the crime for some reason, and why they do that, and what's the reason behind it. And
Okay.
also, there is one more topic that I would love if you guys discuss. There is right now a farmer protest in India going on about that, and if we can discuss that.
Can
Uh,
you repeat what is happening
farm
in India
pro-
again?
oh yeah, there is one law passed by the Indian government that said that there will be a people, they will be take control on the land of the people, and there were like I think a whole country farmers is protesting regarding that, and the Indian government tried to stop that protest. That every person have right to protest, right? But Indian government is not even letting the farmers to protest, and they break the roads just because to stop them not to come to the New Delhi, and they did water fountain on the people in the winter time, and there was like police was literally having beating the old citizens over there. Like a lot of things were going on, and people were on the road from last 3 months, and Indian government nothing is doing up instead of stopping that protest. They're saying that people are like all the Indian news, they're using a mislead word just to say that they're taking out the there are other people who are saying to farmers they're misleading them. But how could a whole country farmer saying one thing, okay, that's okay, that five people are misled by the someone, or seven people were misled, but the whole country can't be misled by someone.
Yeah. So I think, and I mean, I'm gonna suggest a title, because we cannot have the whole thing as a title. But
Right.
I did brought like in case that it wins, so we can have a background of how it happens. I did brought like a summary of what you were saying. Um, Maybe it's like on to what extent authority should rule over its people. Like I don't
Right.
know, something right now, like something like
Like
uh,
people should at least have
people
right to.
versus authority or something like that. um because like we give them power so they can have some, so they can guide our lives, but then they are uh, abusing of the such power in not in the way that we would hope they're doing it, something around this line, correct? um
Hey,
so yeah, I mean,
I love if
yes,
there
I
will be
can
discussion
hear
on
you.
that topic, because even in 1984 in India, they were like they're targeting one group. There is a Sikh culture over there, and they're targeting every time that culture, and they're like kidnapping the people from there, like assassinating them. A lot of things were happening over there, and that thing stopped. Like took after a many years, right? And then again they're doing the same thing, like disrespecting them, taking their turban off in the protest, and taking the people to the jail. There was a person who stopped that water fountain that was going on the people, and you know what they did? Indian government charged crime to murder charges on him, attempt to murder charges on him. They filed that charges, like just to stop that fountain.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. Only the international media, and there is one more media over there, is showing the truth. Rest all are under the Indian government. They're not actually even showing what's going on.
Mm. So what do you think is a good way to pronounce it? Like government, I don't want to say versus people because it's gonna seem like
Right.
antagonistic since the beginning, and we want to like be able to debate. So maybe other people may not see it that way.
I would say that people should have a right to raise their voice against the government.
Yes. No, I understand that that's your opinion, but I'm trying to work on the title so we can have it in order to vote
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. How about the abuse of government authority, or like governmental authority, uh,
Yeah,
abusive, something
Yeah.
along.
abuse of government authority. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go. Abuse of government authority.
Mhm.
Yeah. By the way, Jacqueline, feel free to include if in the chat like a link to like a news article or something that's covering that.
Yeah, I will.
Yes.
I
Okay.
will try to
So.
videos
Mhm.
over there. I have it, the videos too, like what's going on actually. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm posting it on the chat. Again. Oh Jesus, what's going on there? Okay, so post it. Boop. All right. I mean, it could be better organized. I can do better next time. But okay, the point is this: you have, yeah. Let me copy and paste it again. So it's. Okay, so the deal goes like this. You see the topic, and you type the number that uh, you want to talk about next week. But you
Okay.
only have one vote. You only can get one vote. And so pick the one that you want to talk, and same goes for everyone here. And the one with most votes uh, is the topic that we're going to be discussing. So we have 2 trees. Now we're missing Jablin and Morgan. Jablin. Okay, so it seems three. We already. And okay, so 3-1. So next week we're gonna be talking about abuse of government authority.
Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome.
That sounds great.
All right. So well, again, thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you here. It's always nice to see fresh meat. But hopefully we can see you growing so you can feel a little more comfortable in talking in these meetings, which is always open for you to talk whenever you feel comfortable about it. And yes, and next I'm gonna send an email. Hopefully you receive it. I'm gonna use the email that you used today to send it. And until next Tuesday at the same time.
And also, yeah, feel free to check us out on social media. So we have an Instagram, we have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter, we have a YouTube page that contains 90 episodes for the last like 4 years. And then everything that we did this semester, I think we're going to post onto Facebook, or rather onto YouTube sometime over the winter semester, because we have all of our recordings on the Teams page. And also, just special shout out to Fernando. Thank you for taking the time out during the winter semester to continue to I appreciate it, man. I really do.
No, it's okay. I enjoy these things, and it's always fun. I mean, honestly, if it is gonna be like this, I mean, I enjoy having a lot of people because that way I can just like learn from more people. But this way, it explores me to talk more, so I get to explore even a little bit more of things that sometimes I have it, but I haven't realized I have it. So both sides has a good positive thing. Yeah, I'm gonna be here, and I'm gonna be here next week, and so go on. And yeah, and we're gonna be working on it during the whole winter semester, and we're gonna continue then in spring, and well, who knows how summer's gonna be, but for sure spring. Yeah. Well, again,
Awesome.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. You did great. You endured this. You lost a little bit of innocence. Hopefully, it was just for the best. And yeah, thank you. See you next Tuesday. And I will
See you
stop
all
the
next week.
recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.